The academic establishment is of the opinion that the Tunguska event was simply a meteor, but there are many facts that speak to the idea that it was, on the contrary, rational guided flight. It made a turn, which is something that a natural object or meteor could not have done.
What was it that could have done that level of devastation and not leave a crater?
Modern-day UFO researchers were not the first to suspect that the Tunguska event was the work of something other than a meteor. Reports suggest that Stalin believed the Tunguska blast was the result of a UFO that had launched some sort of experimental weapon.
Stalin was interested in the acquired information to determine whether UFOs presented an immediate threat to the Soviet security. That's why he used some of his top scientists to give him an assessment. Scientists like Korolev studied UFO materials.
Sergei Korolev, one of the Soviet Union's most celebrated scientists, would go on to become the father of the Russian space program and the man responsible for Sputnik. Along with Stalin, he was determined to solve the mystery of Tunguska.
These observations prompted him to finance an expedition to the place where the Tunguska event happened.
Sergei Korolev used his own money to send an expedition to the Tunguska area in helicopters.
Korolev never met with Stalin. There was some researchers who was looking to prove that Korolev really met with Stalin, but they didn't find any record.
Stalin presumed it really could have been a spaceship. He wanted to find the fragments of that ship, put it back together, and recreate the object for military purposes.
Initially, Korolev found that many of the physical scars left behind at Tunguska were still visible. But the most shocking discovery came in the form of radioactive metallic fragments found at the site, debris uncharacteristic of any asteroid or meteor.
If you go along the flight path of the Tunguska object and continue past the crash site, you reach an area that Russian ufologists call the Devil's Graveyard. It's a 300 square meter area where not a single plant grows and animals die. It also has a higher than normal radioactivity level. This is a result of what might possibly be a radioactive metallic fragment from the crash.
The radiation levels were there. I mean, meteors don't come down with that level of radiation. So one of the stories is it was a mothership that detonated.
It is believed that Korolev privately told Stalin that the incident at Tunguska had indeed been caused by a UFO, fragments of which were still scattered around the area. However, in his top-secret official report, Korolev is said to have told a much different story. The official party line, Tunguska, was the result of a giant meteor.
The whole point was, if the information serves the bureaucracy, good. If it doesn't exist.
So where were the radioactive fragments from Tunguska taken? Some believe the evidence was transported to Kapustin Yar's underground base, Zitkur.
Different countries have various places where they take their UFO technology. Well, the Soviets basically had one at Zitkur, and it was where they could try to figure out what the technology is and how do we use it. And of course, the security around those bases is essentially shoot-to-kill security.
Was Stalin's team of scientists inside the underground lab of Zitkur using UFO wreckage to advance their fledgling missile defense and space programs?
They had a couple of men, at the top of their program who really pushed the space program. I'm Fred Kulik at Caltech. The head of the space program had direct connection to Stalin and later Khrushchev.
In their quest to acquire UFO technology to beat the Americans in the space race, it has been reported that top Soviet military officials ordered MiG pilots to shoot down UFOs as far back as World War II, a time just before the Russian Roswell crash of 1948.
So that gives you a two-pronged concern about UFOs. One, you want the new technology to top the other guy's flying technology. And two, we need to be on the alert for new stuff from them. So either way, you want your guys to shoot them down.
As the word spread that UFO wreckage from Tunguska and the 1948 incident were being studied at Zitkur, Russia's Cold War enemies were becoming more and more intrigued by what might be going on above and below the top-secret military base.
The CIA had agents in the Soviet Union back in 1950s who had reported on UFOs, and the CIA was very much interested in what was happening in the Soviet Union.
In the early stages of the Cold War, the Soviet military test site of Kapustin Yar became a hotbed of secret activity. Activity that involved advanced weapon, missile, and rocket tests.
So after World War II and the development of the atomic bomb, they were not able to build small atomic weapons. So they had to build big rockets to carry them. Unlike the US, we still had fairly sizable rockets, but we could miniaturize things to a certain extent, much better than they could. So from the very beginning, they envisioned large rockets, and that really gave them a start on the space program as well.
The Russians had one of the scariest pieces of paper I've seen at one of the 20 archives I've been to, said that the Russians have made more progress in the past 18 months in the development of nuclear weapons and methods for delivering them than had been anticipated for 5 years. That was in 1951.
By the early 1950s, rumors of UFO activity and experiments at Kapustin Yar had indeed leaked beyond Soviet borders. Alarming news that some say may have prompted the U.S. to find out once and for all if the Soviets had gotten their hands on UFO technology.
Kapustin Yar and Zitkar were at the top of our military watch in the same way that Area 51 and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and Los Alamos were at the top of their military watch.
Tim Brown is a senior analyst at globalsecurity.org. His specialty? Interpretation of top-secret satellite and spy imagery for both private and governmental agencies.
Kapustin Yar was in the top 10% of facilities that the U.S. intelligence was monitoring in Russia, and that's evidenced by just the sheer volume of declassified documents that are available that show that there was a consistent, ongoing interest in what was going on at that facility.
Not long after the United States had developed its most sophisticated spying machine to date, the U-2 spy plane, the first mission was to, where else? Kapustin Yar.
This is probably the first time anyone outside of the CIA or the intelligence community has looked at this, the U-2 imagery of Kapustin Yar.
These never-before-seen U-2 reconnaissance photos provide a detailed look into this covert military base.
Looking at all the imagery that we put together for this project, one of the things you notice is different activity at the different test sites at different times. The Russians not only tested missiles here, they also trained their missile troops there. So there's missile drills and there's test preparations and test launches going on at this facility all the time.
According to a December 1st, 1960 joint Army, Navy, and CIA intelligence brief, Kapustin Yar is a 1,400 square mile military test complex described as a place of intense interest to the intelligence community. It contained at the time at least 4 ballistic launch complexes, 14 launch pads, a precision tracking radar facility, 3 3,500-foot runways, and numerous strange and unidentified areas. But what U-2 reconnaissance couldn't reveal can now be seen for the very first time in this exclusive underground tour of what could be the nerve center of all Soviet UFO activity, Zitkur. Based on reports and drawings from Russian UFO expert Anton Anfilov, seen in the West for the first time, this rendering is what might possibly be the first glimpse ever of this secret cryptic facility a quarter-mile below Kapustin Yar.
Let's say that you get a chance to go down there to the most secret Russian UFO laboratory. It's not glorious, high-tech, and brightly lit. It's dank, it's dark, and it's dingy. It's Russian. It's extremely compartmentalized. It's like an underground shopping mall, except inside the mall are all these rooms where there's exotic technology being taken apart and put back together. In this hub, they're doing autopsies on alien bodies. In that hub, they're reconstructing an engine. Then you've got these fantastic Rube Goldberg machines. What they are machines to test various components, and then finally you come upon these huge underground hangars. And what you're struck by is that there are no airplanes in the hangars. There are these long cigar-shaped, cylinder-shaped craft in various stages of disrepair because they've crashed. And they're going to try and reverse engineer these. That's what you'd see at this base.
Is this the secret location where the wreckage from the 1948 Russian Roswell crash was taken, along with fragments from the Tunguska UFO?